My name is Asad. I'm a research fellow here at the Seattle Science Foundation, and I'll be talking about the clinical anatomy of knuckle cracking. This is a paper we did earlier this summer, and it was for the journal Clinical Anatomy. All right. So what I'll be talking about is the potential mechanisms and the clinical associations of knuckle cracking. As we were talking about earlier, you might have heard that it's bad for your joints to crack your knuckles. So we will be looking at some studies that, like cross-sectional and case control studies that looked into the associations of knuckle cracking and arthritis. And I'll also be talking about some potential mechanisms. So for the potential mechanisms, there are like a few theories out there. The first one is the formation or collapse of bubbles in the joints, which is the most common theory. We have a lot of studies that support this theory. The second one is recoil of ligaments. So basically when you pull your joints, your ligaments recoil, and that's what's producing the sound. The third one is adhesions inside the joint, which break, and that's what's causing the sound. But I'll be just talking about the first one. We will be looking at 4 studies that show that this theory is it's probably the right one. So the first study was done in 1947, and these authors, they described 4 phases of knuckle cracking. So the first phase, the resting phase, where you're not doing anything to your joints, it's at rest. The second one is when you apply a small amount of force, but you don't hear any noise, and the joints basically move a little bit apart. The third one is the cracking phase, when you actually hear the joint, the noise. So here you're applying more force, and the knuckles, the joints move further apart. And these authors saw a clear space inside the joint when the sound is heard. The fourth phase is the refractory phase. This is when you have cracked the joint, but you cannot crack it further, even if you apply a force. And this is about 20 minutes. So what these authors hypothesized was the clear space contains water vapor, because the pressure before the clear space forms is negative 2.5, and then it increases to the pressure of water vapor. And they said that the sound is produced by, like when you have the clear space, it sends vibrations throughout the joint, and that's what the sound is from. So this was basically the theory till 1971, when Unsworth et al. Showed that the bubble actually disappears after forming. And they thought that this is because of cavitation. So cavitation is just a process where you have bubbles forming in liquids because the pressure falls really quickly. So this is basically the opposite of what happens in boiling. So in boiling, your liquids boil because the vapor pressure gets higher than the atmospheric pressure. Here, the atmospheric pressure is actually dropping really quickly, so that's why the liquid evaporates. And this is basically what's happening in the joint. And after the bubble forms, they said that it's an unstable bubble because there's pressure differences in the joint. So the bubble actually collapses, and that releases energy, which is converted into sound. And this cavitation is actually responsible for damage in turbines and propellers. So that's where the idea of knuckle cracking can be bad for you comes from. So from 1971 till this paper came out, it was the dominant theory, cavitation. But these authors showed that the bubble remains in the joint space for a longer amount of time. And they thought that the formation rather than the collapse of the bubble is responsible for the sound. And they use this theory of tribonucleation to explain how the bubble forms. So this is basically when you have 2 opposing surfaces really close together, and you have a thin viscous fluid in between, and you pull those two surfaces apart. You cannot pull them until you apply like a more force, and that creates a negative pressure, and that's how the bubble is formed. So it's similar to cavitation, but this explains the triggering mechanism, how the bubble would actually form. It's different from how it forms in propellers and turbines. So this last one, this is from earlier this year. This study, they looked at it differently. They made a mathematical model, and their reasoning was that the imaging studies that previous people were using don't have the temporal resolution to look at the bubble forming or collapsing. And ideally, you would have to record the sound at the time of formation or collapse. So, and the current studies, the current imaging techniques have 100 frames per second. Their temporal resolution is, the maximum is 100 frames per second. What you actually need is 1200 frames per second. So they made a mathematical model, and they calculated the frequencies of the sounds produced when the bubble collapses. And they compared it to actual frequencies, and the frequencies were the same. What they also did was calculated the frequency of a partial collapse. So it was the same frequency as well. So what they thought is a partial collapse, like the previous study was actually showing a partially collapsed bubble. So they thought the collapse of the bubble is responsible for the sound. But they also said that they did not study the formation of the bubble. So somebody in the future could actually look at formation as well. So what we basically know is it's either the collapse or the formation of the bubble that's responsible for the sound. But everybody agrees on there being a bubble in the joint space. So, like we know, osteoarthritis can be caused by a lot of things, but the main thing is long-term wear and tear of the articular cartilage. And like we were talking about the energy being released, so these authors, they did a study, and they concluded that the energy that was released is more than what's required to damage the cartilage. So the hypothesis was that in the long run, you can damage your joints. So we will be looking at some studies that looked at osteoarthritis, hand dysfunction, and some other associations. So this is the first one. It's a cross-sectional study, and it looked at the geriatric population. So what they did was they took 28 elderly patients from nursing homes. Their mean age was 78.5, and then they asked them if they cracked their knuckles or not. So they found 15 people who cracked their knuckles and 13 who did not. And out of the 15, only one patient had degenerative joint disease, and 14 showed no changes. And out of the 13, 5 patients had osteophytes of the MCP. So they actually showed a negative correlation. Like people who did not crack their knuckles had higher prevalence of osteoarthritis. So this is the next, this is also a cross-sectional study, but they looked at 300 people. And they evaluated for osteoarthritis and hand dysfunction. They did not find any difference in prevalence for osteoarthritis, but they did find that people who cracked their knuckles had more prevalence of hand swelling and had decreased grip strength. So this is the strongest study out of all of them. This was a case control study. So they looked at people who had osteoarthritis and compared to people who did not have osteoarthritis. And they looked at exposures, one of them being knuckle cracking, and then other risk factors for OA. And they also found the prevalence was the same in both groups. So this is a better study because this is a case control, which is higher on the hierarchy for levels of evidence, so comparing to previous ones. And they also looked at like the total exposure of knuckle cracking years, that's what they called it, and it had no difference. This was another one, more recent one. They looked at just different measures of hand dysfunction, And comparing to the previous study that found decreased grip strength and swelling, they did not find anything. And this was also a cross-sectional study. The last one is interesting. There was a physician who cracked the knuckles of his left hand twice a day for 50 years. The right hand was a control, and at the end, there was no difference between the two. There are other smaller reports, just case reports that have shown, like, one of them was a dislocation of the extender tendon of the fifth digit, a partial tear of the ulnar collateral ligament of the first, but these were from vigorous attempts at knuckle cracking. So there was another one, a 14-year-old African-American girl who had knuckle pads, and the reason that they thought it was because of knuckle cracking, because she was just cracking her knuckles in front of the physician. So this is not really a strong, association. The last one here is a study reported like somebody had lost, they weren't able to crack their knuckles because they had end-stage renal disease and they had secondary hyperparathyroidism. So the author said that calcium deposits in the joints were decreasing the elasticity of the ligaments, so they could not actually pull them further apart. So for my conclusions, the evidence to date has not shown an association between knuckle cracking and osteoarthritis. And there are some fewer, smaller studies that are descriptive or cross-sectional that show some associations, like knuckle pads or loss of the ability. That's it. Thank you.